differ in many different ways. They differ in their behavior, they differ in their typical feelings, and they have different thinking styles. An important concept in personality psychology is different traits. People have different traits. A trait is an individual's unique constellation of lasting, durable dispositions and consistent ways of behaving. Traits are very important for understanding other people and understanding ourselves. Suppose you have a group project for your coursework in psychology, and you are looking for teammates, you're looking for group partners. What kind of partners do you want? What kind of students do you want to work with in a group? You want your group partner to be dependable, reliable. That is one characteristic. You want your group partners to keep their words. If they tell you they're going to get their part of the work done by the weekend, they will deliver that. You don't want your partner to be low in dependability or reliability. You want your partner to be agreeable, likable, easygoing, helpful, trusting. You don't want a partner to be antagonistic, negative, and suspicious, and incooperative with you. And you want your partner to be emotionally stable, mellow, cool, and optimistic. Maybe you prefer extroverted partner. Extrovert people are sociable, talkative, and outgoing. Introverted people are less sociable, less outgoing, more reserved. And you want your partner to be open-minded, creative, interested in different topics, subjects. You don't want a partner to be close-minded or narrow-minded. This is a Big Five model. It's also called the five-factor model. It divides personality traits into these 5 factors or 5 clusters. And this model is a result of factor analysis. If you look at the personality words in the English language, there are many, many words related with personality traits. Gordon Allport, he did a counting. He counted all the words in the English dictionary that are related with personality. And he found 18,000 words representing personality traits. That's too many. That's not manageable. Later on, psychologists developed the statistical method of factor analysis. They combined similar traits together and reducing the number of total personality dimensions to 5, these 5. Before the Big Five model, there was a big two-dimensional model. Eysenck divided personalities along these 2 dimensions. One dimension is introversion, extroversion. This dimension is still available in the Big Five. Introversion, extroversion. Another dimension is emotional stability, stable versus unstable. This dimension is also available in the Big Five. You may say the Big Five is an extension and expansion of the Eysenck two-dimensional model. Even with just 2 dimensions, Eysenck, they were able to draw some interesting profiles of personality. Some people are extroverted and emotionally stable. these people would make good politicians. These people are outgoing, talkative, sociable, responsive. They have good leadership skills. Some people are extroverted, but they are emotionally unstable. These people will make bad politicians and bad bosses. These people are active, they're impulsive, and they're changeable. They change their mind all the time. They're excitable. If you're excitable, you might be able to influence other people emotionally. They are aggressive, they're dominant, and they're restless, they're touchy. You don't want to piss them off. They might retaliate. These people will make poor leaders. Some people are introverted and they're stable. They are like a yoga practitioners. They are peaceful, controlled, reliable. They are mellow, but they're passive. And some other people are introverted and emotionally unstable. This group might be more likely to suffer from some psychological issues or challenges. They are anxious, moody, pessimistic, unsociable, reserved. This characteristic will make them have fewer friends, weaker social support, and they're more likely to suffer from negative moods. These are different ways of classifying personality characteristics. How do you measure personality? How do you know whether somebody is conscientious or not? One easy way to measure personality is inventories, questionnaires, self-report. You ask people a bunch of questions about their personality. Basically, this method is based on self-understanding. And this is the Big Five measurement. It's a free version of the Big Five measurement of personality. I took this test myself. I took the shorter version. This version had 60 questions about myself. For example, this question, I am someone who is outgoing, sociable. I disagree. And this measures extroversion. I'm not extroverted. I'm going to have a low score on extroversion. The second question, I'm someone who is compassionate, soft-hearted. Yeah, I agree. This measures agreeableness, likability. Agreeable people are soft-hearted, compassionate, helpful, and trusting. Am I somebody who tends to be disorganized? Yeah, I agree. I kind of strongly agree with this one. This measures discipline, measures conscientiousness. Are you somebody who's relaxed, handles stress well? No, I'm not. I disagree. This item measures what? Emotional stability. I have low scores on emotional stability. Each dimension, each of the 5 factors have many questions contributing to it, not just one question. That's why you have at least 60 questions. Number 5, do you have a few artistic interests? I don't know what few. What do you mean by few? What do you mean by few? What do you mean by many? I would give it 3. So that's a problem with a self-report. These questions, different people gave different interpretations of the questions. And the result may not be so consistent across different people. Now, this is this example will give you the idea of personality inventory. I completed the 60 questions and I got the result. Here's my result. My openness score is medium, in the middle. High score people are original, creative, curious, complex. Low score people tend to be conventional, practical, narrow interest, and uncreative. I'm right in the middle. My percentile ranking is 53. So that means 53 of people, 53% of the people who have taken the test have lower scores than me. And I'm more open-minded than what percentage? More open-minded than 53% of all test takers. I'm okay in the middle. And then conscientiousness. Oh, I got low score on conscientiousness. And the feedback is, you probably have a messy desk. Yeah, I do. If I'm looking at my desk right now, it is indeed messy. But this is a surprise. My percentile is 5%. Only 5% people have lower scores than me on conscientiousness. So 95% of all test takers, they have higher conscientious than me. High score means reliable, well-organized, self-disciplined, careful. Low score people tend to be disorganized, undependable, negligent. Well, I don't believe that's true. So that means that it is a valid measurement of my conscientiousness. Well, in answering the questions, am I being overly self-critical? Am I too hard on myself? And look at it another way. Do you think the people who are above me, the 95% of all the people who have a higher conscientious score than me, do you think they're overly optimistic? Do you think they suffer from self-serving bias? Do you think that they are giving themselves too high scores on the questions? I have an issue with the validity of this task, this dimension. Do we really know each other well enough to offer valid self-report on our own personality? I have a question about that. And then my extroversion score, that's not surprising. I have a low extroversion score. That means low score means introverted, yeah, reserved, inhibited, quiet. Yeah, that's true about me. And my percentile ranking is 7%. Only 7% of all test takers are less extroverted than me, more introverted than me. 93% of all test takers are more extroverted than me. Agreeableness, well, I have low scores. I'm disagreeable. I'm unlikable. High scores means good-natured. Oh, I'm not good-natured. Sympathetic. I'm not sympathetic. Forgiving. Courteous. I don't have those good characteristics. I have low score. That means I'm critical. I'm rude. I'm harsh. And I'm careless. Percentile ranking 17%. Only 17% of all test takers are more critical, are ruder than me, harsher than me, and more careless than me. Well, I would really question that. Is this test valid? I answered those questions myself. That's true. But maybe the other people who answered the questions, Are they overly generous about themselves? That's my suspicion. Negative emotions. This is emotional stability. And I have high scores on negative emotions. That means I have low scores on emotional stability. And high scores on emotional stability, well, high scores on negative emotions have another word. That word is very judgmental. It's called neuroticism. Neuroticism. And it seems that I'm highly neurotic. Wow, look at that. My percentile ranking is 99%. 99% of all test takers have less negative emotions than me. I'm the top 1% in emotional negativity or neuroticism. I'm the top 1% of the most neurotic people among all those who take the test. High scores means to be nervous. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous, high strong, insecure, worrying. Yeah, I worry a lot. I worry about a whole lot of issues. And basically, this is a profile, personality profile, me. And it's based on self-report, based on the Big Five model. Beside the Big Five, there's an earlier inventory, popular inventory, the MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. This inventory is mostly used in clinical psychology. It's used for making diagnosis of people who have psychological problems or issues or challenges. Clinical psychologists would call them people with psychological disorders. Usually, it's used in the counseling or therapy settings. Suppose I have a psychological challenge and I go to see a therapist. Before I receive therapy, the therapist will first give me the MMPI and to identify the major issues. So this is on the blue line, this is a pre-test. Before treatment, this person have a high level of depression. And depression is in green area, that's clinically significant. That means that needs medical attention, needs therapy. He needs some treatment in this area, depression. And another issue would be masculinity, femininity, gender identities is in the problematic dimension range. Another issue would be anxious, guilty feelings. These three areas are the main areas that need work. And this one is also kind of problematic here. Psychopathic deviancy. Oh, those words are really judgmental. But these are the wordings of MMPI. This is old instrument. And apparently some work might need to be done there. Disregard for social standards. Once you have identified the major problem profiles of the client, you can provide therapy. After the therapy is over, you do the assessment again, see are there any improvements. In this case, all the major indicators are in normal range. Apparently, the therapy was very successful. Depression got reduced back to normal. The gender identity issue got back to normal. This anxiety, guilty feelings got back to normal, quite effective. The MMPI is mostly used for clinical settings, but later on, even nowadays, Some psychologists use it for testing so-called everyday people, people without psychological challenges. I think that's inappropriate. Nowadays, most psychologists, most personality psychologists use the Big Five model. The wordings are easy to understand, and the dimensions are very stable. They are relevant to everyday life, not only in clinical settings. Each of the Big Five dimensions have a cluster of smaller dimensions. For example, conscientiousness includes several small dimensions, 5 or 6. So here I'm listing only 3. Organized, careful, disciplines, also dependable, reliable, hardworking. Agreeableness, this factor would influence some 5 subdimensions, including soft-hearted, trusting, helpful, etc. Emotional stability, and low emotional stability is called neuroticism. People have high scores on emotional stability. They are low on neuroticism. The Big Five model has become very popular. There's good reasons for that. Number one, these 5 dimensions are quite stable in adulthood. And so if I get a high scores on like a neuroticism as a child, and then you test me again when I'm an adult, when I'm 30 years old, I will still have relatively high scores on neuroticism. It's stable. Although there are some changes in personality, for example, some introverted people do become more extroverted as they grow up if they get supportive relations, good social experiences. In other words, a nurture environment is important for shaping personality too. However, overall, personality traits are stable over the entire lifespan. Suppose if I'm a nervous child, introverted child, I might get more outgoing a little bit in adulthood. I might train myself to be more outgoing, to be more talkative, to develop better social skills. However, it's going to be difficult for me to be very outgoing, to be extremely extroverted. Those kind of dramatic changes are not common. And the way or the degree I can change myself is restrained by biological factors like my nervous system. Personality tend to be stable in adulthood. Another reason for the popularity of the Big Five model is cross-cultural commonality. Psychologists have tested personality with this 5 model in different cultures. Most cultures show the same structure. And then another reason for the well-receivedness of the model is that it's comprehensive. Supposedly, the Big Five factors, these 5 factors cover all the individual differences. Well, if not all the individual differences, but most of the individual differences, they don't miss a lot. Although recently there's a Big Six model. The Big Six model is supposed to be even more comprehensive, filling the gaps left by the Big Five. But the Big Five would cover most of the individual differences. Personality has a lot of relations with biology, biological constitutions, brain structures, brain activities, nervous system, arousal, and these biological factors tend to be stable. They're influenced by genetic inheritance. And this contributes to the stability of personality. Genes influence our temperament and behavior styles. Some psychologists believe that there's an interaction between personality and situation. Walter Mischel is a leading thinker in this area. He believed that personality factors or traits may be enduring, but they also have interactions with situation. For example, my personality trait might be very introverted. I'm not comfortable talking to other people. However, the situation influences my reactions. When I'm teaching a class, I need to talk to people. I can't just shut up, be quiet as an instructor, as a teacher. So I'm a talkative, I'm able to communicate, I'm able to socialize in one situation when I'm teaching a class. But when I'm meeting strangers, I'm meeting just random people that I don't know anything about, I'm quiet, I'm nervous, I'm shy. People show different characteristics in different situations. And maybe that's why I got such a low scores on my personality like a profile. For example, conscientiousness. Yeah, you probably have a messy task. Yeah, I do have a messy task, but that's only one kind of a situation. You're testing my personality. I'm a messy in one situation, but I'm well organized in other situations. But for example, when I'm handling financial situations, when I'm kind of managing my money, when I'm making my tax return, I am well organized. Or when I'm kind of preparing my coursework, when I'm grading students' exams, I am well organized. I'm dependable. So my personality traits have interaction with the situation. Situation matters. Next, we need to talk about personality theories. The Big Five model and the MMPI, these inventories have been developed without much theoretical guidance. It's based on empirical testing. You gave these questionnaires to many people, and you look for commonality, and you look for connections. You look for connections between the different atoms, and then you group the similar atoms, the highly correlated atoms into one dimension. Open-mindedness includes the creativity, curiosity, complexity, and that's based on empirical testing. Personality theories give some deeper understanding on why do people differ? What are the factors driving individual differences? An early theory of personality is a psychoanalysis theory. This theory was proposed by Freud, Sigmund Freud. The key idea is the unconscious. Freud believed that we are driven by unconscious. And he divides the mental life into 3 different levels. The id, oh no, I got a typo here. The id is in the unconscious. We are unaware of the id, and it contains sexual instincts and aggressive instincts. It follows the pleasure principle. It demands immediate gratification, and it's very powerful. It's very energetic. And then the superego is a moral standard, it's conscious. And the superego tells you what's right and what's wrong. It tells you about the expectations of the society. The ego is the conscious part of the mental life. Only a small part of mental life is work as a conscious level. It follows a reality principle. The ego is responsible for making sure that the id does not fight with the superego. Sigmund Freud believed that sometimes the id, the unconscious drives, have a conflict with the superego, and that will create a lot of problems. For example, well, Freud has this idea of the Oedipus complex. The Oedipus complex is a very unique idea of Freud. Freud believed that boys and girls, they all have a sexual instinct. Even little boys would have a sexual desire for the mother. And well, that's in the id, in the unconscious. The little boy doesn't know that, is unaware of that. But this unconscious desire, sex drive, would come into a conflict with the superego. The superego is the father. Well, you're not supposed to have sexual relations with the mother because the father is in the right place to have sexual relations with the mom. And the boy would have to resolve this conflict. Otherwise, the boy will be experiencing neurosis, neurotic problems. According to Freud, the way to resolve the conflict, Oedipus complex, is by identification. And dad is the competitor. He's too strong. If you can't beat him to win over mother, what do? You join him. You imitate him. You identify with him. You identify with the rebel parents, and you internalize his characteristics, his moral values. According to Freud, that is how you develop the superego. What's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong. Freud has a theory of personality development. He believed that kids, children, they go through these 5 stages of psychosexual development. This is an old idea. We don't need to remember the details. If you're interested, you can read the book. But this is an old idea that received very little empirical support. The problem of this idea that is subjective. It does not generate a testable hypothesis. Most mainstream psychologists would not pay too much attention to these theories. However, one contribution or one lasting contribution of Freud, still working today, still valuable today, is the defense mechanisms. When the id becomes too strong, when the sex instinct and aggressive instinct become too strong, it becomes threatening because you could be punished by society. And this instinct is incompatible with the superego. It violates your ideal image of yourself. It violates your moral principles. So the ego must do something. The ego must control the instincts. And these are the defense mechanisms. There are several important defense mechanisms. One defense mechanism is suppression, inhibition, suppress the instincts. No, don't come up, stay in the unconscious. You get us all in trouble. Don't think about those things. Those things are immoral. These are the repression mechanisms. Another defense mechanism is called denial. Denial. If somebody has unacceptable thoughts, desires, instincts, he tends to deny that. A denial is used not only for unconscious drives, but also for quite conscious activities. Some alcoholics, they are in denial. They don't believe that they are addicted. Oh, no, I'm not addicted. I can stop if I really want to. And some smokers are in denial. I'm not addicted to tobacco. I take it just now. If I want to quit, I can quit. And that's a very powerful defense mechanism. Another one is regression. Regression means a backtrack. You backtrack to an early stage of development, even into infantile stage. And when you are stressed, you act like a baby. You throw a tantrum, you become mad, you cry. That's one important defense mechanism. Reaction formation. Reaction formation is very useful concept to understand some behavior. For example, if I'm angry at a person, but that person is too powerful, too important, I don't want to upset him, what do I do to control my anger, my aggressive instinct? I do the opposite. I become extra nice, extra polite to that person. I'm doing that just to control my deep-rooted aggressive instinct toward this person. That's reaction formation. And then there's a projection. Projection is often used in real life. Projection means projecting my characteristics, my desires, my instincts outward onto other persons, other people. If I'm really aggressive, I don't want to know that. And I project it to other people. I feel other people are aggressive. They're trying to fight with me. They're trying to harm me. And then there's a rationalization. Rationalization is just finding excuses to cover up my real desire or my real instinct. And if I'm aggressive to other people, if I abuse other people, I have excuses. No, I'm not abusive. They provoked me. They asked for it. I'm just defending myself. I'm in self-defense. Those are rationalization strategies. And then there's a displacement. Displacement is used often to handle aggressive instinct. If I have aggressive instinct and my target of aggression is too tough, too big, too powerful, I may change my target. So if I'm angry at my boss, I can't do anything about him. And then I become aggressive to some weaker person, the dog, the cat, kick the dog. That is aggressive instinct. These defense mechanisms are not good ones, are not effective, they're not productive. sometimes they're counterproductive. But then the good defense mechanism is sublimation. Sublimation means sublime. Sublime, what's the contrary? What's the opposite to sublime? Gross. So in a sublime way of a defense mechanism, you find a proper way to express a sex instinct and aggressive instinct. Societies offer some allowable or permitted ways of expressing aggressive impulses, for example, sports, competition, competitive sports. Hockey is pretty aggressive, but that's allowed. And business competition is allowed. Those are sublime ways of expressing aggressive impulses. There are also some ways of expressing sexual impulses that are allowed. For example, artistic activities, creative activities. These are supposed to be sublime ways of expressing sexual instinct. The theories developed by Sigmund Freud was called psychoanalysis. Sometimes they were also called a classical psychoanalysis. Freud had several students. His students extended his theory, and the new theories are called the new Freudian theories. They are also known as psychodynamic theories. They have some commonality with the Freudian psychoanalysis. They all believe in unconscious. They believe that childhood experiences are important, and the unconscious drives, unconscious conflicts are important. But they disagree with Freud in what's in the unconscious. According to Freud, the traditional classical theory, what's in the unconscious is sex and aggression. But his students believe that there are something else. There's some other stuff in the unconscious. One new Freudian theorist was Adler, Alfred Adler. He believed that in the unconscious, we not only have sexual drives, aggression drives, but also have inferiority complex. Children may feel inferior, may feel inadequate in handling the challenges of life. How do we handle inferiority complex? How to resolve the conflict created by inferiority complex? We do that by doing the opposite. We do that by striving for superiority and power. Sometimes, when a person is dealing with unconscious inferiority complex, that person becomes overly competitive, overly aggressive, overly hungry for power and inferiority. This is a defense mechanism of reaction formation. Another student of Freud was Carl Jung. Carl Jung believed that we have rich experiences in the unconscious. Not only sex and aggression, but we also have a collective unconscious. The collective unconscious are images and ideas we inherit from our ancestors. It's culturally based. For example, all human cultures have some common mystic images. For example, the mother. All cultures have a mystic images, mother as a nurturing figure. All cultures have the mystic images about hero's journey into the unknown. These imageries are called archetypes. They are part of our collective unconscious. Psychoanalysis have developed some methods of understanding unconscious. Psychoanalysis try to gain some insight into people's unconscious. There are two or three major methods of psychoanalysis. One is free association. In free association, you just verbalize whatever thoughts come to your mind. And supposedly, the analyst can analyze the content of your verbalization, free association, and try to understand the unconscious. For example, Freud pays particular attention to slips of tongue. He believes that when you have slips of tongue, it means that your ego is not watching your unconscious, and unconscious drives, unconscious instincts escape from supervision. For example, when I'm talking about my mom, I might have a slip of tongue. Well, I hate my mom. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. That was slip of tongue. Actually, I mean, I love my mom. But according to Freud, my slip of tongue shows something more about my unconscious drives. Another way to understand the unconscious is dream analysis. Freud has a very well-known book called The Analysis of Dreams. He believes that dreams are the royal roads to understanding the unconscious. And he asked people to keep diaries of their dreams and talk to him about their dreams. According to Freud, there are two types of contents in the dreams. One type of contents is called the manifest content. These are the explicit contents of the dreams, what you dream about. I may be having a dream about climbing stairs. I'm climbing a long flight of stairs, and that's manifest content. The latent content is hidden content. That's a symbolic meaning of my dream, and that will depend on analysis. Freud believes that when you're dreaming about climbing stairs, steps, the latent content is usually sex, obsession with sex, or some issue with the sexual desires. By analyzing people's dreams, Freud believes that he can get access to the unconscious. Psychoanalysis also uses projective tests to understand the unconscious. Projective tests, these are based on the principle of projection. Projection is one of the defense mechanisms used by the ego to handle strong unconscious instincts. One well-known projective test was the TAT, thematic apperception test. This was developed by Henry Murray. In the test, the test giver showed the test taker a group of photos, ambiguous photos. For example, one photo will show this lady and this man. The test taker will ask the test giver will ask the test taker to tell a story about the photo. What story can you tell about the photo? And then The task giver, the expert, the reader, will analyze the story. So suppose I tell the story about this picture. I think that the lady, she had just murdered her husband. She killed her husband, and she's afraid. She's scared. She's trying to make the murder look like an accident or natural death. That is the content of my story, the manifest content, the explicit content. And then the analyzer, the analysis giver is going to analyze the story. He's going to try to look for hidden or the latent content, the symbolic meaning. He may say that my story is a projection of my aggressive instinct. I have some murderous aggressive instinct in my unconscious. I don't know my instinct, but I'm projecting my inner feelings onto this picture. This is one type of a projective task, the TAT. Another projective task is the Rorschach ink blot task. The task giver have 10 cards, and each card has an ambiguous picture, ambiguous pattern. And the task taker is supposed to tell story about the pattern. And then the task giver, the expert, the analyst will analyze the story. They look for unconscious conflicts. For example, I might tell a story about this pattern. What do you see in this pattern? Well, I see mom and dad, and I see mom and dad fighting, and I see a baby being caught in between, and the baby is crying. So the analyst analyze this story. Well, this, I've got a typo here, plots. And from the plot of the story, the analyst may see that you have unconscious complex feelings towards your parents. And maybe you have suffered some traumatic experiences in your childhood, and now the trauma has become part of your unconscious. You have repressed traumatic experiences in your past, and your story is a projection of that repressed feelings. These are the projective tasks. Well, there are obvious problems with these tasks. One issue is reliability. Another issue is validity. Reliability means consistency. So suppose I tell you the story about this murderous lady, and does the task give a consistent result of my unconscious feelings? No. If you give my story to two different analysts, they disagree with each other. One will see a murderous instinct in me, another one may not see it. So the task itself is not objective, it is subjective, it is unreliable. These tasks do not provide reliable, consistent results. Validity is also in question. Validity means that, are you testing what you are supposed to test? Suppose I tell you the murderous story about the lady in the picture. Does that show my murderous instinct or aggressive instinct? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I told the story because last night I watched a movie of a murderer, a detective, a case, a crime movie, or I read a novel, and it was my memory that is fresh in my mind that gave me this story. the tests, the projective tests, they have a low reliability and they have a low validity. Overall, psychoanalysis and psychodynamic theories do not receive strong scientific support. For one thing is that the theory do not give us a lot of testable hypotheses. They do not make predictions that can be tested. Most of the theories come from clinical experience or come from like after the fact explanations of clinical cases. Another issue is that psychoanalysis pay a lot of attention to repressed painful experiences, especially in childhood. However, scientific research does not support this claim. In fact, when people have traumatic experiences, painful experiences, it is difficult for them to forget. It is hard for them to repress it into unconscious. Some people have flashback memories about traumatic experiences. Another personality theory is a humanistic perspective. This approach was pioneered by Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. The foundation of this approach is the hierarchy of needs. The human needs fall into a hierarchy from the low-level needs, basic needs, to high-level needs. The highest level needs is self-actualization. Humanistic psychology pays a lot of attention to higher level needs. We have a need for self-esteem and a need for self-actualization. Humanistic psychologists pay a lot of attention to self-concepts, understanding the self. And according to Maslow and Rogers, what do you mean by self-actualization? They describe self as having two parts. One self is ideal self. In your ideal, in the ideal world, what would you be doing, and what kind of life you are living? And then there's a realistic self, the real self, that is the current self. The ideal self gave you your potentials. Maybe my aspiration is to be a good scientist, or my aspiration is to be a good political activist, changing the world. That's my ideal self. My current self, or my actual self, that if I'm on my way to realizing my potential. I'm on my way to become a good scientist. I'm taking the right coursework. I'm going to college. I'm receiving the training. I have a lot of opportunities open for me. And then, well, I'm on my way to self-actualization. And that will give me a lot of self-esteem, high self-esteem. And self-esteem can be secure versus insecure. Secure self-esteem is real self-esteem, real self-acceptance. I feel comfortable with who I am. I accept myself. I don't need to change myself or hide anything from other people in order to feel good about myself. And then the insecure self-esteem is a defensive self-esteem. So defensive self-esteem depends on other people's praise, other people's positive feedback. I need admiration. And then there's a narcissism. Narcissism is too much self-esteem. These people are full of themselves. It's exaggerated self-esteem and self-love, and they demand other people's admiration. Humanistic psychologists developed some ways of measuring self-concept. For example, Rogers would ask people to describe themselves. Who am I? When you think about yourself, what thoughts and what ideas come to mind? Carl Rogers used the humanistic theories to develop a therapy. He calls it the person-centered therapy, also calls it the client-centered therapy. He believed that people become mentally challenged, or people have psychological problems because they are not able to achieve self-actualization. And they have low self-esteem, they have poor self-esteem, they don't have any real self-acceptance. And he wants to improve people's self-esteem. How do you do that? He says that he can give the clients unconditional positive regard. So one way to give people positive regard is that you don't want to label them. You don't want to stigmatize them. He doesn't use diagnostic labels. If I go to see Carl Rogers for therapy for depression, he will not give me a diagnosis. He will not say that, oh, you're depressed. And he convey unconditional positive regard. You are valuable as you are. You have true value without need to change anything. You don't need to change your depression to be valuable. You don't need to change yourself to be valuable. You are valuable as you are now. Now, this kind of unconditional positive regard is therapeutical. So I can develop a positive self-regard to myself, improve my self-esteem. Humanistic psychology has had a lot of influence on education, on therapy, and on how you take care or people take care of their children, child rearing. And the main influence is on positive self-concept. In education, nowadays, the teacher are supposed to give a lot of positive feedback to children to avoid being critical. And in therapy, the therapist shows a lot of empathy. The humanistic psychologists also believe that human beings are basically good and they can improve through self-actualization. Humanistic psychology also have some limits and receive some criticism. One criticism is that the concept from personal humanistic psychology is weak and subjective. For example, self-actualization. What do you mean by self-actualization? What kind of people are self-actualizing? And people may have different interpretations of self-realization. For very poor people in unfortunate situations, maybe having food, having shelter, and providing for their family, that's self-actualization. And but Rogers believed that self-actualization is based on realizing your full potential. But what is my full potential? sometimes I don't know what are my full potentials, and your potentials are constrained by your possibilities, opportunities. Another limit or another criticism for humanistic psychology is individualism, self-esteem. Self-esteem is good, is positive, but too much emphasis on self-esteem, on individualistic values, may be encouraging indulgence, selfishness, and a sense of like erosion moral values. Still another criticism for humanistic psychology that it doesn't really appreciate the reality of human evil. People can do evil things, people can be aggressive and mean, and it's really too much unrealistic optimism, too much positive imaginations, you might say, about human nature. Then another theory about personality is the cognitive or social cognitive theory. Social cognitive perspective on personality was developed by Albert Bandura. And he proposed this tripartite model. It's also called the triadic model. Its main characteristic is reciprocal determinism. The tripartite or triadic model has three components. Bandura believes that any human behavior at any moment is determined by these three factors. And these factors have a reciprocal determinism. Reciprocal means two-way interaction. In order to understand a person's behavior, you need to investigate people's personal beliefs, personal cognitive factors like ideas, beliefs, and personality traits. Suppose I'm an introverted person, I'm shy, and I believe I have poor social skills, people don't like me, I don't handle people's situation very well. Those are my personal factors, cognitive factors. These factors will influence my behavior. If I have those beliefs, I will be withdrawn. I will be avoiding social activities. And on the other hand, my behavior will influence my personal cognitive factors. If I am withdrawn, if I don't speak, if I don't talk to people, if I don't socialize, my behavior will strengthen my beliefs. I will be even more convinced I have a poor social skills. And then my behavior will influence the situation. So if I'm withdrawn, and if I don't talk to people, when I meet people, people will believe that I am aloof, I am distant, I don't want to socialize, I am a loner, and I prefer to be alone, and my situation will change. And on the other hand, my situation will influence my behavior. You see, people leave me alone. People don't talk to me. People stay away from me. I will be even more withdrawn. And then my situation will influence my personal cognitive factors. Well, people are cold. Well, people don't talk to me. This situation will convince me that social interactions is not my thing. I'm not a social person. I have a poor social skills. I don't feel comfortable around people. And then these ideas will change my situation. If I carry these ideas in my mind, when I see other people, I will interpret them as threat. I'm going to be embarrassed. This is going to be embarrassing. this is going to be hard for me. These three factors have a reciprocal interaction. And together, they determine people's personality and people's behaviors. The social cognitive approach also emphasizes self-concept, self-esteem. But the social cognitive approach is more concrete in understanding self-esteem, self-concept. They stress self-control, a sense of control. Some people have an external sense of control or locus control. They believe that the situation control their life, their behavior. They believe that, for example, if I'm a nervous person, I see a social situation, I need to talk to these people, I need to give a presentation in front of my co-workers, and I might have external locus control. I might think that, oh, this audience is critical. It's very critical. They're not going to like my presentation, and I can't change that. I have no control of the situation. And then I will be nervous. But some people have internal locus control, and the same situation will make them feel that, oh, these people are critical, and this talk is important for me, but I can control the situation. I can control my voice, and I know the content of talk really well. I can make a good presentation and win them over, and I will make the situation a success. An internal locus control would give people more confidence and more self-efficacy. And follow-up research shows that internal versus external locus control might be learned. They might be learned from past experiences. One important research on this topic was the learned helplessness research. Martin Seligman did the research on dogs. So he gave electric shocks to dogs. And in the first phase of the study, he called the learning phase, he would give the dogs electric shocks, shock the dogs. For some of the dogs, the shocks are escapable. Escapable means that you can turn it off. So when the electric shocks comes, you press the nose button. The dog uses the nose to press the button. The shock stops. But then the second group, they don't have that opportunity. The shock is inescapable. You get shocked, whatever you do. So this experience will give one group a sense of control. You can escape. And the other group, they don't have a sense of control. And then in the next stage, the testing stage, Seligman would test the doggies on reactions. Next stage of the Seligman will shock all the dogs and see whether they try to run away. The dogs that had received inescapable shock in the learning phase, they don't run away. They just lay on the floor and scream and suffer. And they have developed learned helplessness. And you might say that that's an external locus control. They feel that I get shocked, I don't know what to do. Whatever I do, I get shocked. It doesn't make any sense to even to struggle, to even to run away. And that's really an extreme level of external locus control. On the other hand, the doggies that had suffered escapable shock, they still had a sense of control. When they get shocked, again, they're going to run away. They're going to try to do something to really kind of help themselves. And then to summarize the whole landscape of personality psychology, we use a biopsychosocial approach. A person's personality and behavior are determined by these three different levels of factors: biological influences, psychological influences, and social influences. Social cultural influences are particularly important. These are the environmental influences, including environment from the past, childhood experiences, and also influences from the current social situation. And the cultural expectations and social support all feed into a person's personality. The psychological influences include your beliefs, learned responses, thinking styles, thought processes. And then biological influences would influence the nervous system, the brain activities, and the genes. Together, these factors would influence a person's personality development.